Are you into IndyCar racing at all?
I like IndyCar racing. I'm not particularly educated or insider. I do like it.
Do you go to the race?
Yeah, usually. Yeah.
Okay.
I've gone probably 15 out of the last 10 years.
Okay, so that's
a lot of
better than me.
That's into it. Yeah,
it's better than me.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really participate in this conversation. You can, but so I guess two things. One, they had first open wheel testing yesterday.
I saw that.
Obviously, when this episode releases, we'll be in the fabulous month of May here in Indy.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one piece. I was excited to see that because I guess I didn't. Maybe I knew, but I didn't realize until I saw it on the news. I was like, oh, sweet,
So you weren't
happening.
there. You just saw it on the news.
There, no.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I don't know if you have any favorite drivers or not, but obviously this is Tony Kanaan's last year, which I kind of gotten wrapped up into him and follow him, and so that should add a little more, another element. He's been a fan favorite for I don't know, the last 5 or 10 years, something like that.
Yeah.
When you guys go to the race, where do you typically sit?
Usually somewhere between the start finish and first turn.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're just down from us. We're usually first turn area.
Okay.
Have you taken your kids now?
We have.
And have they bought in?
Plus or minus.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's an every year thing, but they like the horizon. It's a lot of work getting in there, bringing in food and drinks and stuff. So, and it's a long day, but it's fun. They enjoy it.
That's the key. So my parents had set a rule when we were kids that you had to be 9 before you could.
Okay.
And I was a kid, I was like, what's that all about? Now that you're a parent, I'm like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Because you have like a 4-year-old, you take the race and they just melt down. It's like, sorry,
You're
buddy.
done.
Like, we're here for the duration. Like, we're not leaving.
Yeah.
That's
it's a long day.
Lap 25 and
right.
175 to go.
Well, you could lay down and take a nap if you can.
Yeah. Well, because of the topic, Joseph Newgarden has done some public awareness stuff for melanoma. So I've always been a Newgarden fan since the beginning.
Makes
and I
sense.
met him when he was first coming into the circuit and hit the big time. And so he did some stuff pretty early on. And I think we've seen most years they're giving out like wristbands to show like UV exposure and some sunscreens out there too. So I think that he's been a part of that. And I think the IndyCars, IMS has been good about sponsoring.
How do those wristbands work and how accurate are they? And the reason why I asked that is because like I could see people saying, oh, we're interested, so I'll put one on. And if it like all of a sudden just goes off the charts, or like that might freak some people out.
Yeah, I don't know much of the technology around that. I think it's probably pretty goofy, but it's like, glow in the dark balls. I mean, like you don't have to have them out in the sun very long to get them to glow in the dark. So I think that's the same with those.
Okay.
But I think it's probably a terrible idea for people that are visual and they're like, until they get sunburned, they can't really tell.
Yeah. Yeah. So. It's a nice reminder. Just halfway through the race, like, okay, you should probably throw some more back on. Yeah.
Now, I would say if it had a way of determining, okay, I put that first layer on at 8 a.m., but by 1 I should reapply. If it had some sort of alert to let you know that, I don't know how the hell to do that. But
you could with different, if it changed different colors. So like application 1 was like became visible after a little bit of time, and then application 2, and then 3, and then 4.
Right.
We should probably stop talking about it and just patent it
if
and
you
make it happen.
consume 7 beers by 1 p.m.
There you go.
Yeah, do it on the beer count.
You may change colors, but you're like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. True.
Yeah, I think more likely you'd see technology on like a watch or something like that might say, all right, you've gotten exposed to so much.
Right.
I mean, we say every 2 hours. I mean, if you're going to be out in the heat of the sun
every 2 hours,
that's a lot.
Yeah.
Golfers, I say at the turn, because that's around 2 hours usually, especially. Usually you're sweating a little bit if you're walking. So,
I'm adding up the amount of time I've played golf. I'm like, I am not applying as often as I should be applying.
Well, that's why I stay pretty busy.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yes. Yeah.
Golf and tennis.
It's like a chiropractor advertising at a go-kart track.
Yeah.
Right.
Sore necks and back.
I have an idea. As we kind of enter into the whole pickleball world, we now have a new sponsor.
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Heard it here first.
Right. Okay. Well, let's get rolling. Is this thing on? Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Summits Podcast. Thank you all for joining us from wherever you get your podcasts or for tuning in from the Heroes Foundation YouTube channel. Thank you for doing so. And guys, on the YouTube channel, something for you that's absolutely free of charge. If you haven't hit that subscription button, please do so now. It'll take a second, and it's absolutely free. Also, while you're doing that, hit that little notification bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes drop, like this very one. All right, guys, we've got a good one for you here today. Local homegrown product I've known for a long time. He and his brothers and sisters, Dr. Nick Countryman, is joining us here at the Summits Podcast. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
I had to say Nick or Dr. Countryman or...
Please, Nick. Thank you.
There you go. I figured we'd known each other long enough.
I'll still call you Dr. Nick Countryman because I just met you, right?
Right. It's that level of respect.
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't you give everyone a little introduction to yourself?
Sure. Well, thanks very much for having me. I'm really honored. Obviously, this is a subject near and dear to my heart. We enter into the time where we start to talk about skin cancer awareness, and that happens to be my passion. So I'm a dermatologist here with Dawes Fretzin Dermatology in town, and we have a really robust group of dermatologists spread out throughout central Indiana that do a great job taking care of our community. And I specialize in the group with skin cancer. So I do an in-office procedure that we are able to remove skin cancers primarily of the head and neck. We do the pathology on site, and then once we can clear tumors, we are able to reconstruct patients here in my office. So it's a really neat way of treating a very common disease that has continued to increase in our country in skin cancer. And so something that I'm really passionate about, and I'm glad that you guys invited me to be here and talk a little about that and about what we need people to know about it.
Yeah, no problem. Question for you. At what point, so for our listeners' benefit, Nick and I somewhat grew up together. Nick and my younger brother, Joe, are the same age. So they grew up together. Nick's older sister, Heather, and I were in the same class. And then his older brother, Brad, and my older sister were in the same class. So we've known each other, the families known each other for a long time. At what point, a two-part question, at what point did you know that you wanted to become a doctor? And then secondarily to that, when did you decide, hey, dermatology is where I want to go, or what I want to practice?
Yeah. So, our families have known each other for a long time. I guess you guys lined up, my sister and my brother and your sister. They could have been arranged, but it'd have been really weird if Joe and I were arranged there. That didn't work out. But no, we've known the Todd family for a long time. Spent some time down in Fort Myers, Florida.
Yep.
Had some good times down there, getting too much sun. But your family was always generous to take me along. I remember riding in the back seat of the van, just laying on the floor, sleeping on the way down there. But a lot of good times. So, so science was always my interest in school. And so as, AP chemistry in high school and biology, it just definitely piqued my interest. So then I went to Notre Dame and studied biochemistry. And at that point, there's a couple different ways you can go. You can go towards more of the science path and research and different types of basic science research in the laboratory, or clinical research, or, medicine. And I was, very interested in both, but definitely kind of just being a people person. I think that more naturally medicine kind of felt like the right path. And so I, headed in that direction and applied to medical school and was accepted. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I used to chase my dad around with my toolbox and knew that I liked using my hands, and a lot of medicine is procedural. And so definitely spent a lot of time in the operating room as a medical student, very interested in orthopedic surgery and ear, nose, and throat surgery. But then was introduced to dermatology, and specifically Mohs surgery and skin cancer. And, after spending some time in some basic science research labs in dermatology, and then in the operating room, I kind of put it all together and kind of found this subspecialty within dermatology that piqued my interest. So I'm able to kind of use, my science background, but also love the procedural side of what I get to do, treating skin cancer day in and day out for my patients.
You mentioned subspecialty. What is that subspecialty?
So it's called Mohs surgery, or Mohs dermatologic surgery, or micrographic surgery. The way that dermatology works, you do a 1-year internship after medical school, followed by a 3-year residency, and then you're eligible to be a board-certified dermatologist. And then you could do several different paths. You can, after that, but I went on to do a fellowship for a year to specialize in, the skin cancer and the procedure that I described and the reconstructions from those. So just allowing me to have a little bit more expertise than the average dermatologist, in this field.
Right. If you would describe the Mohs surgery for us.
Sure. And
keep it super exciting.
Super exciting. All right. Yeah. So all the patients that present to my office have a biopsy-proven skin cancer. The most common.
So they've already been diagnosed at that point.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So those common being basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma. We kind of put those in this field of non-melanoma skin cancers.
Okay.
And those two comprise about 90% of all skin cancers, maybe a little bit more in our country. Okay. And there's as many as 5 million of those diagnosed every year in the United States alone. That's as many as all their cancers combined.
Yeah.
Fortunately, these are primarily treatable, locally aggressive tumors that can be removed with different methods, including Mohs surgery. And then the other percentage is melanoma. So we treat superficial melanomas as well in our office. So the patients come in usually with the diagnosis of one of those three. There's a few other rarer tumors that we treat. And then I meet the patient. We mark out the tumor. It's primarily neck up. We do some really aggressive or recurrent tumors off of the head and neck on the genitalia. Hands and feet are another place that we operate. And we mark out the tumor. We anesthetize it. It's all done under local anesthesia, which is an advantage because the patients don't have to get put to sleep. Some of our patients are aged and are not great candidates to get put to sleep. But even for young people, anesthesia does have its downsides if we can keep them awake. So they come in, get anesthetized, all local anesthesia. We cut out the tumor, we cauterize, bandage them, and then we take it to our laboratory. We do a frozen section technique where we freeze the tissue. We cut very thin sections, we stain it, and then I interpret it. So there's some major advantage of me cutting it out and then interpreting it in my own lab. Okay. So at that point, there's two outcomes. One, the tumor's been completely removed. The patient's ready to get reconstructed. Two, there's some tumor remaining. We are able to map that out and serially go back and remove that area. So not only achieving a very high cure, but leaving a very small wound, taking only what we need, nothing extra. Mm-hmm. So we call it a tissue sparing procedure. So in that way, we're able to achieve high cure rates as high as 98 to 99% for basal cell carcinoma. And leaving the smallest wound. Why is that important? Well, many of these things are in anatomically, functionally, or aesthetically important areas. So we're talking, just this morning, I treated tumors on the eyelid, on the nose, on the ears, on the lips. All those are pretty important areas for various reasons. Yeah. And aesthetically very important when you take off, a several centimeter tumor on somebody's nose. That's pretty important, not only functionally, but aesthetically. So, being able to not achieve those high cures, but allows us to then reconstruct the wounds, leaving normal tissue behind. So then we set out to do all different types of things. We do some pretty cool stuff in the office, as simple as letting things heal naturally, but then we stitch things side to side together. Just this morning, I took somebody's forehead and put it onto their nose to reconstruct a really massive wound from a superficial melanoma. So, everything in between. But, even though many of the tumors that I treat are not life-threatening, many of them are quite disfiguring. And so I think, as part of this conversation, you want to educate, the people listening about, early intervention and educating about screening and about protection. But that was a long-winded way of trying to keep it exciting.
No, it's okay. So you mentioned carcinomas and melanomas. About roughly how many different types of skin cancers are there? Are those the two primary?
Yeah, so there are a lot, but a vast majority of them are made up of basal cell carcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, and melanoma. Those are ones that, most people will have heard of. Okay. The basal cell and squamous cell carcinoma are very common, mostly treatable, locally aggressive tumors, millions, but, deaths are in only a couple thousand. Melanoma is much less common. There's probably, Cancer Society suggests probably around 100,000 melanomas this year. But they'll probably be close to 10,000 deaths, maybe a little bit less.
It's very aggressive, correct?
It's a much more aggressive tumor that tends to spread beyond the local area, metastasize to other areas of the body. So that's the one that's the most deadly of all.
So for these removals, are you doing it all by hand, using different tools, machinery, technology? How are you doing? Especially, like you said, like on the eyelid and some of these very sensitive areas and small areas. How do you handle those?
Yeah, it's I think my son's going to try to put me out of work and try to figure out a robot that's going to do it all, but we do it all by hand.
Okay.
So really the instrumentation hasn't come too far along. We use sharp blades and scissors, and most of it's all done by hand.
Okay.
Same with all the processing behind the scene. It's all done by technicians who are trained to be able to process the tissue.
Okay.
But we use some, cautery machines and some lasers and other things for specialized procedures, but it's pretty much just fine work. I use surgical loops so that I can see fine detail and really precisely remove, especially when you get around like the eyelid and things like that. That's super helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, no like really special like machines or lasers like these cool robots that other people are using. But my son Luke's like, during the pandemic, he's like, we just need a robot. You can just do this from home, Dad. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that'll work very well. So.
It's interesting. I actually just was watching a video the other day talking about like different, scalpel blades, like down to obsidian blades and sapphire blades and things like that. So is that something that comes up for you guys that much at all?
Ours are pretty basic. Stainless steel is what we kind of stick with. They're super sharp and they work pretty darn well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, Nick, I know your cancer story or stories, but obviously our listeners don't. What, based on the theme of the Summits podcast, what is your cancer story?
So, my life's been very blessed. I have had just an incredible childhood, raised by two great parents, but unfortunately neither is still with me. I lost my mom when I was 27 years old to lung cancer, and more recently lost my dad to colon cancer. I grew up with grandparents, all four of my grandparents, all of them living, on my street. My grandmother lived to 105 and another into her 90s and others into their 80s. So that's kind of what I grew up expecting. So to say that I was, blown away when my mom died in her mid 50s, I would say it'd be an understatement. So cancer definitely hit close to home. Every day I wish I could see my mom, watch my children, grow up, and, I know she does from heaven, but it's not the same to have her here to, give advice. And same with my dad, even though he was in his early 70s, it still just felt too young to lose him. So many other family and friends who've lost the battle of cancer, but definitely mom and dad, definitely nearest to my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know your sister Heather and my wife have that common bond of losing their moms that are certainly a way too early of an age.
Yes.
And I know they've shared many of those stories. Heather was obviously very present when Cindy's mom passed away several years ago, and then never would have guessed that they would have had a role reversal as early as it did.
Right.
I know they've talked quite a bit about that since. It sucks. I mean, I don't know any other way to put it.
It does. I mean, like I said, it's really blessed to have great parents, and it's never long enough, whether they're 55 or if they're 95.
Yeah.
But definitely cancer can take people all too soon, and really appreciate the work you guys do to try to, allow people to not have that same fate, and so they can spend more time with their loved ones for years, much longer than they should. It's getting, lung cancer has come a long way since my mom was diagnosed, 20 years ago, and same with even with things that are happening in colon cancer. So I just hope that people in the future will have more opportunities than what my parents did to enjoy life and their families.
Yeah, well said. We appreciate your guys' support. I mean, you guys were there the early beginning days, if you will, of the Heroes Foundation. So certainly been a huge part of our success. Flipping back to skin cancer a little bit, now that we're in the month of May, which is Skin Cancer Awareness Month,
right.
What is some of the, educational tidbits you would provide to folks on ways they can try to prevent themselves from getting skin cancer?
Yeah, so it's a great thing. And, the American Academy of Dermatology, which I'm a part of, has spent a lot of resources to try to educate the public. In the United States, we haven't done a great job, with protection of not only ourselves, but our children. And we've done a lot of work to try to improve that. It's really simple stuff. And, as we talked about earlier, it seems, almost insulting to tell people, but it's as simple as protection. And then it's screening and it's monitoring yourself. So the most important is really just protecting your skin from the ultraviolet rays of the sun. So ultraviolet, radiation is probably the number one predictor of the development of skin cancer. And so as simple as seeking shade when you're out during the heat of the day, particularly between 10 and 2, is critically important. And then wearing sun protective clothing. It's critically important to protect our skin from those damaging rays. And it's the best way to do that is with clothing. So there's a lot of really good products out there. A lot of the sporting goods stores sell them. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them, all different outlets on the internet. We sell them in our retail store at the office. But a lot of that's come a long way. In my own family, we wear sun protective hats. So we recommend hats with, 4-inch brims on them to try to protect your ears and your neck. That's super helpful. And of course, sunscreen. I mean, it seems silly and nobody loves to talk about this topic, but we recommend an SPF of 30 or better and a wide spectrum, which means it covers UVA and UVB. And all those things are on the label. So SPF 30 or greater. Usually it says broad spectrum or UVA and UVB. And then just using that, I tell people, if you buy it and put it on your shelf, that doesn't help a whole lot. So you got to really use it.
Right.
And you got to use it regularly. So if you're going to be sweating or in and out of the pool, you want to go reapply after you dry off. If you're going to be out for extended periods of time, more than 2 hours, you want to reapply. If you're going to be playing golf for 4 hours or 5 hours, depending on how quickly you're playing or how much beer you're drinking, then you're going to want to reapply it at the turn. So
and if you're going the Indy 500, you put it on at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Apply again at noon.
Sounds good.
And apply again maybe at 4 or something.
Yeah, if you're still out there at 4, it's been a long day and a lot of crashes. But I think that's a good idea. Just every few hours, just pulling it out and reapplying, because it does not last all day. If you're outside getting sun beaten down on you all day, it does not last. And then using plenty of it. A lot of people just use a little bit of it. And we use kind of like a shot glass because a lot of adults can, imagine that if you ever have the time and you're putting on some sunscreen, squeeze something into a shot glass. That's what we say to recommend to cover. And it's a lot. So probably more than what you probably use.
Yep. I can agree to that.
Okay. So, so there's a big one. So seeking shade, sunscreen, sun protective clothing, and hats. And then protecting your lips is another one that we try to remind people. You can put sunscreen right over your lips, but also people like chapsticks and things like that. Get one with SPF in it. There's a lot of them that have it in it now. And then the eyes are the other one. You can get skin cancer in your eyes, so protecting them with good sunglasses can be super helpful, especially if you're out at the race or other things. And the last thing I warn people about is that even if you're in the shade, sun reflects. So if you're on the beach, or if you're next to a pool, you gotta be really careful, because a lot of people are like, I had sunscreen on, I was in the shade, they're sitting next to the pool or on the beach, and the sand or the water's reflecting it. And I've seen a lot of people get in trouble, even my own family, in that situation.
Or even snow skiing.
Exactly.
Off the snow.
Thank
people
you.
think, it's cold here, not a big deal. And on a sunny day, and they get back and their face is fried.
Yep.
Yeah, we learned that a few times.
Yeah. No, we've all been there. And the other thing is people, say, it was cloudy out. It's like, unfortunately, the clouds do not protect you very well. So even on a sunny or on a cloudy day, my kids, I tell them to put their sunscreen on. Like, Dad, it's cloudy out. It's a joke around our house. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, I know that. So just remember, even if it's cloudy out, you still can get a pretty good sunburn.
Yeah. On the self-exam part, or even just if you're visiting your doctor, I get a physical exam, like an executive physical every year. I know that's, for whatever reason, that's sadly kind of not the norm.
Right.
And it's part of that. They do like this, I don't know what it's called, but basically this camera scans and finds, freckles or moles or whatever. And,
right.
And it takes a closer look at ones that kind of stand out. What do you recommend for those who, either don't see their doctor enough, don't get annual physicals, especially if they're getting up in my age or our age and older? Obviously, I'm clearly older than both of you guys. But also, if they're not seeing a physician and they just say, hey, I got this kind of funny looking mole, what should they look for? And what is that trigger point to say, hey, maybe I should go have a professional look at this?
Yeah. A great question. So I know most of us don't have the privilege of getting, a mole mapping or some picture done by, somebody regularly. And that's okay, because there are ways that, we can monitor ourselves, or we can have significant others help monitor us, because backs and, backsides are harder to see in mirrors.
Yeah.
So we keep it really simple. So we try to educate all our patients about kind of warning signs of moles, bad moles. So we use just an easy thing to remember, A, B, C, D, E. Okay, I can remember that, right? I mean, we all know our alphabet. So A is for asymmetry. So most moles should be symmetric. So you should be able to cut them in half, flip them on themselves, and they should pretty much look like each other on both sides.
Okay.
B is the border. The border should be regular. So sometimes the borders are a little jagged or irregular. That can be a warning sign for an atypical mole or melanoma. C is color. So usually they should be kind of one color, tan or brown. But if they're tan and brown and dark brown or black, that can sometimes be a concerning sign. Then diameter. So usually we use the kind of rule of thumb, the back of a pencil eraser. So if it's much larger, not necessarily a predictor of melanoma, but bigger ones oftentimes have a higher risk for being atypical or cancerous. And then E we use for evolution or evolving. So something that's changing over time, we usually worry about. Usually moles, they grow, they stop growing. People can get new moles into their 40s and maybe even their 50s, but beyond that, probably not. They probably are getting other benign growths, but not moles. So new spots at that age. So A, B, C, D, E, asymmetry, border, color, diameter, evolving are the things that we try to teach our own patients every day when we see them in the clinic, especially ones that have lots of moles, so they can monitor at home, because it's also oftentimes patients or there are significant others who are spotting something like, that's a new one, that's different, that one has these types of features. And they oftentimes are part of the same care team that we are, to get those things biopsied early for early detection and treatment.
If someone notices something like that, obviously first thing they should do is go have a professional look at it, like yourself.
Right.
What is the process for you guys evaluating that? I mean, you're kind of following those same guidelines, but
Sure.
with a much more professional manner and experience. But then what triggers to say, you know what? Yeah, this needs to be treated, or I need to remove that, or what have you? I mean, what's the criteria there?
Yeah, so it's not easy. It's not straightforward. I recommend people see a team run by a board certified dermatologist. We spend our days monitoring patients that have melanomas, history of melanomas, or atypical moles and other types of skin cancers. So trying to find a team that's centered around a board certified dermatologist, give you your best chance for monitoring these things. And if you've had a history of these things, or your family has, you should see these people probably annually. But if you've not seen a dermatologist and you find something that you're concerned about, the first point of care can be your primary care doctor. Many times they can help triage, if you need to see a dermatologist. But most people, have access to dermatologists one way or the other. There's free skin cancer screenings throughout the month of May, all over our city, all over our state. You can just Google it, search it up, and you can find free skin cancer screenings. Those are mostly colleagues like myself, out there giving all patients, whether you have insurance or not, access to a screening. And if they find something concerning, they can get you in touch with people in our community that can help, take the next step. But if, you have insurance and you're able to see a dermatologist or part of that team, the process would be that you'd then have that evaluated by somebody on our team. And if it requires further, evaluation, you'd be numbed up and the lesion would be biopsied. It'd be sent to a pathologist. We have a board-certified dermatologist in our group, Dr. Hyatt, and she would take a look at the lesion underneath the microscope at that point, and then she can see whether the histological pattern is one of melanoma or an atypical mole requiring additional therapy, and what that would be. Or if it's something that actually, it had some weird features, but it actually is normal. And depending on what happens there, that will then dictate how that patient's treated.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. Anything we're missing?
I don't think so. We covered a lot of ground.
Right.
I think, I brought some props, but I don't know how many people watch this in videos and how many people listen to this.
You never know.
We could all put on some hats if you want to.
Is that a hair joke?
Yeah, well, you don't have any hair to protect the top of your head. Even though a hat would help.
Yeah.
But no, I think we covered a lot of ground, and I think, all the highlights that I wanted to hit.
Okay, perfect. Cool. Well, thank you for coming in. We appreciate that.
That was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
That was fun.
And you guys, hey, you heard it from Dr. Countryman. Check out or Google it for free skin cancer screenings in the month of May. May is Skin Cancer Awareness Month, so check that out. See if you haven't checked yourself and you might have a suspicious mole or something, get yourself looked at. Don't wait. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of the Summits Podcast. We appreciate you guys from listening in from wherever you get your podcast or tuning into the Heroes Foundation YouTube channel. Thank you for doing so. Don't forget, absolutely free, hit that subscription button if you haven't. Until then, don't forget, beat cancer.